Donald Trump spent the wee hours of the morning scream-tweeting in all caps on Truth Social to announce his support for publicly posting the 10 Commandments in schools as a new law goes into effect, mandating every classroom in Louisiana to do so. Boy, Republicans sure do love their government mandates when they're packaged as Christian extremism. On Wednesday, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry signed legislation that requires the display of the 10 Commandments in every classroom in the Bayou State.
This bill mandates the display of the 10 Commandments in every classroom in public, elementary, secondary, and post-education schools in the state of Louisiana. Post-education schools in the state of Louisiana. Because if you want to respect the rule of law, you got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses.
Thus making it the only state with such a mandate and raising questions about the long-standing tenets of separation of church and state in the United States. Here are just some of the requirements of the mandate.
Under the new state law, which will take effect in 2025, the commandments must be poster size and in a large, easily readable font. In a joint statement, civil liberties groups and other opponents, including Americans United for Separation of Church and State, say they'll file a lawsuit challenging the law, calling it bluntly unconstitutional.
And according to reporting from the New York Times, it will also include a 3-paragraph statement asserting that the 10 Commandments were a, quote, prominent part of American public education for almost 3 centuries. Which, you know, slavery was also a prominent part of American history, but you don't see that logic being used to propose its reinstatement for obvious reasons. And before we get into Trump's ridiculous reaction, here is the co-author of the law, Laura Ventrella, attempting and failing to defend this egregious display of religious extremism.
Look, this nation has gotten out of hand with crime, with the bad negative things that are going on. Why is it so preposterous that we would want our students to have the option to have some good principles instilled in them? If they don't hear it at home, let them read it in the classroom. It's different than the Mayflower Compact, which is mentioned in the document as well. I don't understand why this is so preposterous and that litigation is being threatened. It doesn't scare us in the state of Louisiana. We say bring it on.
Because if someone has a home in which they choose to believe something different, which is welcome in this country, it's literally why people fled to come here to found this country to begin with, then they should be allowed to. And it's not really an option if you're requiring it to be put up in the wall of a classroom. What do you say to the parents of students or even teachers who don't share your religious views?
Don't look at it.
What would you say if your child had to go to a classroom in which the 5 pillars of Islam were required to be on the wall? How would you feel?
Again, this is not about the 5 pillars of Islam. This bill specifically states the 10 Commandments. It is a historical document.
I'm presenting you with a hypothetical that would help you put yourself in the shoes of someone you may not understand and their point of view. How would you feel if you walked into a classroom and something you didn't believe in was required to be on the wall? You can answer that question.
I appreciate you, Chris. I cannot sit here and gather and fathom what you could give me 1,000 hypotheticals. But again, this specific bill applies to this specific text. The Quran or Islam, that is a very broad statement. We're specifically talking about a limited text on, mind you, a piece of paper that's not much bigger than a legal sheet of paper. Some kids might even need a magnifying glass to read all of this. This is not so preposterous that we're somehow sanctioning and forcing religion down people's throat. I've heard the comments, and it's just ridiculous.
Now, it should come as no surprise that Donald Trump jumped in on the insanity to show his support. Trump has long curried the political favor of Christian conservatives and did precisely that in a 1 a.m. post on Truth Social, going all caps to appeal to those in favor of the 10 Commandments in public settings. Trump posted on social media, "I love the 10 Commandments in public schools, private schools, and many other places for that matter. Read it. How can we as a nation go wrong?" This may be, in fact, the first major step in the revival of religion, which is desperately needed in our country. Bring back the 10 Commandments, MAGA 2024. I genuinely have no words. Now, Trump has a long history of defying the core tenet of the separation of church and state, or flouting his willful ignorance of it to appeal to evangelical voters, even going so far as to call the coming election date, quote, Christian Visibility Day.
We're going to win the White House and we are going to save our country. We're going to save our... And what the hell was Biden thinking when he declared Easter Sunday to be Trans Visibility Day? Such total disrespect to Christians, and November 5th is going to be called something else. You know it's going to be called? Christian Visibility Day, when Christians turn out in numbers that nobody has ever seen before. Let's call it Christian Visibility Day.
He also infamously sells Trump-branded Bibles at his campaign rallies, and some of his most ardent supporters in Congress have even called for the end of the separation of church and state.
Now, this might sound fringe, but the beliefs behind the Seven Mountains ideology, and specifically the ideologically driven effort to get believers into powerful positions in our government, is not fringe at all. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson recently said that he believes the separation of church and state is, quote, a misnomer. In an interview on CNBC, Johnson said that he believes the founders did not want the government to encroach upon the church, not that they didn't want principles of faith to have influence on our public life. It's exactly the opposite, end quote. Shortly after he became Speaker, Johnson was apparently not aware that there was media in the room when he compared himself to Moses while speaking about his ascension to the speakership in a speech to conservative lawmakers.
And that is the scary part. This is not a fringe belief for MAGA Republicans, as you just saw. And if these are beliefs that Donald Trump and the leaders of the Republican Party are ardently supporting, how can anyone believe that they won't go even further to establish God's Christian kingdom with, say, a nationwide ban on abortion? The courts are clearly on their side, and they are getting even more bold in saying and implementing these extreme policies. And I'll try to end things here a little positively with this CNN correspondent's response to the ludicrous Louisiana law that I think encapsulates just how insane it is.
Joining us now, proud son of Louisiana, Democratic strategist James Carville, and CNN senior political commentator Scott Jennings, who served in the George W. Bush administration. I should have said proud son of Carville, Louisiana. So, James, what do you make of this new law in your home state?
Well, I think given the storm season is coming up, we don't need the Ten Commandments, we need the Hail Mary. It would be, much more appropriate for what we face with here in Louisiana. I don't know which one they're going to put up. There's 10 different versions of the Ten Commandments, and our schools are so underfunded that I'm not sure half the kids even know how to read them. But it's one of the dumbest waste of time I've ever seen in my life.
And I mostly agree with him, but after seeing all the far-right support behind it, I don't know that this is a waste of time for them. I genuinely hope so, and as you heard, there is already significant pushback from civil liberties groups that will hopefully stop this from going into effect. But frankly, it doesn't bode well that extremists on the right feel bold enough to propose and try to forcibly implement these mandates. As if you needed any more reason to get out and vote your conscience in this election, the core tenet of the separation of church and state is now firmly on the ballot in November. So we should heed this as a warning of what this nation will become if we allow Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans to take control. I don't know about you, but I, for one, am not trying to end up living in an authoritarian theocracy.